No, that means court is in session, and there's only one place that we should start this week because we're going to have a double down in terms of this court session. We're probably going to have a little bit longer than usual, but we're going to enjoy this because, as many thought, the trade has actually happened, and James Harden is now a Philadelphia 76er in exchange for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. All of that stuff is brilliant. Yeah, we already know that it reunites Daryl Morey and James Harden. We already know that Ben Simmons now will have a new home in New York. But let's get to it. And BJ, I need to know how you feel about this because with James Harden now be a part of the Philadelphia 76ers, the East is wide open. Down to the Celtics at this point of recording in the 6th place, respectively, they're only 4.5 games behind the top spot. And I'm saying it, and I'm saying it with chest. I believe this move now elevates the 76ers to favorites in the Eastern Conference.
Well, guys, on paper, we've been talking a lot about the Brooklyn Nets. We've been talking about the Philadelphia 76ers and all of these things. But guys, when are we going to get a chance to talk about basketball? When we're going to talk about something that's actually happening on the court. And that's what I'm excited about most. This is really turning. I live out here in LA and in the entertainment capital of the world, right? There's Hollywood, there's movies, there's theater, there's, drama. Well, all we're talking about is everything that's happening off the court. I'm sure later on today, we're going to be talking about the press conference and what we can pull from there and all of these storylines. So I'm just excited to see these young people get on the court and start playing. James Harden is currently hurt. He just announced today or yesterday, I believe, that he won't be back on the court full time to after All-Star weekend. I don't know when Ben Simmons is going to get back on the court. But guys, more importantly, I want to see these guys play. Now we've been talking. Ben Simmons has been out what seems like forever. Let's see what happens on the court. Everyone's projecting how they're going to look. Well, I believe, and look at this fit and all of that. Okay, sounds good. But at some point, I think every player will tell you got to do it. So I'm excited to see that. I don't know how this is going to turn out. Anytime guys get traded, there's a human part of this, okay? And the human part is the following. I don't know how Ben Simmons is going to react with this trade. I really don't, because you're going to a new team, a new system, so forth and so on. I don't know how James Harden is going to react playing in front of Philadelphia and their fan base. Because let me tell you something about Philly. Philly's not coming here to win the regular season. Philly's not coming here to get to the conference finals. Philadelphia has one thing in mind, to win the last game of the season. So the fan base there, they've seen excellence. They've seen great players from Julius Erving to Moses Malone to one of my favorites, Andrew Toney, World Be Free. I love that name. And now you got another great player there, continuing that tradition in Joel Embiid, and they're adding a player who they think could push him over the top. So make no doubt about it, what the Sixer fan base is expecting. And I think now let's start talking about what happens on the court. I'm not going to project anymore. We know what these guys have done in 2K and all of these other video games and their ratings and all of that. Now I'm going to call it like I see it. So until they get on the court, I'm going to let it be. And but I'm excited, though. I'm excited for the storylines. I just want to be there when Ben Simmons comes back to Philly. That's my goal right now, is to be in the building when Ben Simmons walks back into that building, because I just want to hear the crowd and I want to see what's going to happen and how everyone's going to respond to that pressure. They say pressure busts pipes. Well, there's a lot of pressure on both of these organizations now, and let's see how it's going to play itself out.
Spoken like true OG on this show. I love it. Pressure bust pipes. Yeah. Hey, Mo, BJ made some great points there. But I want to dive into the Hoop Genius. Shout out to the 2K family that sponsored the Hoop Genius podcast as well. We see you, bro, working real hard. Yeah. But I need to know how you feel. Yeah. Because 22, 8, and 10, that's an elite stat line for anybody in this league. Some people are considering that a down year for James Harden. With this trade, those numbers, and looking at the greatness that Joel Embiid is doing right now, do you see them as the favorites in the Eastern Conference?
Well, first things, BJ says, pressure bursts pipes, but pressure also creates. And that's what the Philadelphia 76ers are hoping for here, because Joel Embiid is having a diamond season right now. It's the NBA's 75th anniversary, and he's looking right now like the MVP. They've strengthened their squad by adding a former MVP in James Harden. On paper, That's the best two-man duo in the league. But notice how I said on paper, because we've seen this story play out before. James Harden plus superstar teammate doesn't always work out how you might want. We just heard that he was in Brooklyn with Kevin Durant, the greatest scorer of the generation, and he would roll his eyes when the coach would draw up a play for KD at a timeout. So how is he going to handle being second fiddle to Joel Embiid in Philadelphia? Because the human aspect of a trade is very important. Because you could talk in theory how these two guys, you've got a great guard and a great big man together. In theory, they should dominate on the court. But how's the human element going to work? Because if James Harden does want to be second fiddle to KD, how's he going to do that? Because Joel Embiid is the man in Philly. This is his team. Make no mistake about it. He is that guy. He's not going to fall back now that James Harden is there. Same way with James Harden, he wasn't happy playing with Russell Westbrook. He wasn't happy playing with Chris Paul. And don't even get me started on what happened with him and Dwight Howard the last time he played an elite big man. For me, James Harden wants to get back to having the ball in his hands. He wanted more of the ball compared to what he had in Brooklyn. He kind of preferred how he played in Houston. And that's interesting to me because if we look at a player like Joel Embiid, we can talk about how they have a great two-man game. But until I see it on the court, I can't put them down as favorites. Because in theory, great. Joel Embiid, James Harden, unstoppable pick and roll. Well, Embiid is only the roll man in pick and roll situations 3.5 times in a game. But he has 8 post-ups and 5 isolations. Whereas James Harden, when he was winning his MVP, campaign, he had 16 isolation possessions per game and 8 pick and rolls as the ball handler. So either Joel Embiid is going to have to start setting more screens and playing more pick and roll basketball and taking less post-ups and less isolations, or James Harden is going to have to adapt and let Embiid go off and do his thing and, kind of fall back a little bit. I'm interested to see how that works. And I'm also interested to see how this impacts Tyrese Maxey, who's been the prime ball handler at that guard position for Philadelphia so far this season. And then how is this going to impact guys like Danny Green, Furkan Korkmaz, Georges Niang, who come off the bench and are great role players, but these role players who shoot three-point shots, they need to get their rhythm. And if they're not going to be able to get their regular shots and get into their regular rhythm, are they still going to be able to shoot at such a high percentage as they have been doing so far this season? So until I see this pair on the court, because I do think it can work, but until I see it, I can't believe it. So I've not got them as favorites yet, but when I see them in action, I'm ready for the basketball to begin because that can change everything.
Ovie, we both know that Mo and BJ would have, let's say, a couple of horses in the Eastern Conference. You can come from a completely neutral perspective. Yeah, just an appreciation of a big man in Joel Embiid and, of course, the greatness that is James Harden. Daryl Morey has done everything he could do. He's shown he's willing to do whatever is possible to win a championship with this team. But do you have faith in the 76ers like Daryl Morey does? And do you have faith in James Harden and Joel Embiid, clearly as the GM does as well? What do you turn around and see this direction and this tandem doing? And are they the favorites in the Eastern Conference?
I wouldn't say that they're the favorites in the Eastern Conference. I think they've definitely, obviously improved in certain aspects. However, when you look at the makeup of the Eastern Conference, especially right now, I think, the Boston Celtics are a good example of a team who maybe might have gotten off to a pretty slow start by their standards. But, they're starting to pick things up. There's too many dangerous teams, I think, in the Eastern Conference at the moment to just say there's one clear team that's the favorite to come out. Obviously, you have to show respect to the Chicago Bulls. Philly have obviously been playing well in spurts. Joel Embiid is having an absolutely, amazing season. However, my problem with Philadelphia, my problem with the Nets is they have huge pieces that are very unpredictable in James Harden, in Kyrie Irving. And whenever you have, pieces that demand that much attention and are that big a part of your team, of your offense, of what you do, I think it's very, very hard to just bank on them and say, okay, this is how things will play out, because you just never know with these guys. It could be an off the court issue. It could be anything. So I definitely do agree with BJ from the standpoint of, I think we have to see how these things sort of progress and play themselves out. However, I think we just still have to show respect to the reigning champs, to the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're the team, obviously by regular season standards, you wouldn't say that they've just blown away the competition. No. However, I feel like they've been going about business quietly
and they've been to the playoffs before and they've won. You know, they've been there and they've won there. You know, so I feel like they're content with sort of how things are going. They're not so much concerned about being the best regular season team, you know, because they've been there, they've done that. I think we've seen it in the past with teams who have been very good in the regular season, and that's translated onto postseason success. After you have that postseason success, it's almost as if, hold on, wait, I'm a little bit above this. You guys know I can do this. I can do that if I want to. But now, obviously, the goal is playoffs, and to win a chip. So we still got to show some respect to the Bucks, because to me, I still think they're the most dangerous to come out of the East.
Okay. So we've entered a court case now, and Mo, I'm so happy you jumped in because everybody's had a touch. Everybody's been nice about the situation, and now we can dive in. And Double M, I need to hear from you because who are you stopping? If I give you a starting five: Harden, Maxey, Tobias Harris, Danny Green on the wings, and Joel Embiid, who are you doubling? Who are you stopping? Who's stopping that team offensively anyway?
Well, you know, lucky for me, Jaydee, my team has had great success in the postseason against Joel Embiid, namely due to our elder statesman in Al Horford, who for some reason gives Joel Embiid nightmares every time they match up. So we're going to see if he's conquered those demons this season. For the other teams in the East, though, I would be very concerned. But, you know, going back to the take earlier, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they've got, you know, big bodies that they could throw at them. You know, I think that's why the Milwaukee Bucks went and picked up Serge Ibaka. They need more bodies to throw at Joel Embiid. Because here's one thing. You don't stop a guy like Joel Embiid. You don't stop these great players. You have to understand Joel Embiid is going to go out and he's going to get around 30 points and he's going to play his game. You have to be worried about stopping the other guys from getting going. So you've got to be stopping the Danny Greens of the world and the Tyrese Maxeys of the world. That's got to be your game plan going at the Philadelphia 76ers. But my question that I have, you know, for BJ and Ovie to dive into is this James Harden that we see this season still the same caliber of James Harden that we've seen previously? Because he looks a lot slower. I don't know whether that's from a lack of effort or whether that's because of the hamstring injury that kept him out of the playoffs last season. But he has definitely looked a lot slower. And you know how much he relied on that speed, that burst of athleticism to get into the paint and draw those free throws. And it's that burst of athleticism that had defenders on their heels, which makes it so easy for him to step back and hit his famous step back three. So do you see James Harden as a little bit perhaps slower? And could that potentially work to the Sixers' advantage in playing a slower half-court style of basketball?
All right. Well, I'm gonna try to tackle this, guys, in 30 seconds. One, is he the James Harden of old? The James Harden of old didn't win a championship. Okay. In order to win, you must have what's called or considered, however you want to call it, a blended brand of basketball. Okay, BBB, and it's not Big Baller Brand, but a blended brand, right? Meaning you have to have inside, outside. And there has to be a blended brand of basketball that's essential to winning a championship. We're not talking about a guy who's going to average 37 a night. We're not talking about a guy who has a quick first step and all of those things. Now, what I'm expecting from James Harden is to have a blend of the following. Can he take care of Joel Embiid? Joel Embiid is a force in the NBA that everyone has to deal with. And we know there's no one in this league, no single player can contain this man by himself. So James Harden is going to have to learn how to play off of Joel Embiid. That's a fact. Okay. Now, let me tell you something about Doc Rivers. Everyone is talking about Coach of the Year. We talked about the Coach of the Year and all that. This is perhaps Doc Rivers' greatest coaching stint in his career. And he's already had a Hall of Fame career, because in order to be a great coach, you have to coach through adversity and coach through problems and coach all these things. How many coaches can take away a talent like Ben Simmons and still hold this team together and have them a game or so out of first place? So Doc Rivers is going to demand something of James Harden that no one has talked about, but let's say it here. Is James Harden going to play defense and give me the effort and energy necessary to win an NBA championship? I'm not worried about offense, because a championship mentality is the following. If you don't score, guys, and I don't score, the score is 0-0. But if you think you're going to walk into Philadelphia, ring the bell, and just outscore somebody, that ain't happening. And James Harden is not going to get enough touches to do that. So unless we change our mentality, unless we change how we're going to play, Unless we have this blended brand of basketball that's going to require him to defend, to rebound, share the ball, organize, make sure Joel is taken care of, because I'm not going to just have Joel doing pick and pop with the season he's having. Joel Embiid is going to be on that box punishing people. And that means that James Harden won't have the opportunity to be driving and doing all those things. So this is going to be a new system for him. If they struggle early, I'm not going to panic, because Doc Rivers understands the following. We have to get this team to play at a championship level. We have to get this team. And right now, James Harden hasn't played championship caliber basketball throughout his entire career. Great individual, Hall of Famer, all of those things. But this is something a little different. And it's going to require him to give everything that he can give to the game in order for him to get this goal. And that's going to start on the defensive end, guys, not on the offensive end, because he already has an MVP player playing this year. And they're not going to change that for one player.
Ovie, the only thing I left to ask you is, this is why we love the game so much, because if I gave you any other sport where someone who's a former MVP, a multiple time scoring champion, is inserted onto a contender already, and we're still sitting here questioning whether or not the chemistry can work. But I'm going to give you one more chance. Maybe, hopefully, you agree with me this time. Do you believe that the Philadelphia 76ers are right now the favorites?
No. Because I don't think, adding James Harden to the Philadelphia 76ers, even if he's playing good basketball, I wouldn't just put them head and shoulders above everyone else in the East. There's a lot of really competitive teams this year in the East, and I think, you can't underestimate teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers, Chicago Bulls, obviously, like I mentioned, the Nets, when they obviously have their guys on the floor. You can't overlook these guys. And I think it does come down to sort of a difference maker, like BJ alluded to, and that's whether you're willing to do something extra. What are you willing to do that will separate you from the other teams that have guards that can put up 20 to 30 points? The Cleveland Cavs, they just got LeVert. Last game I watched from him when he was in Indiana, he just put up 40. There's guys throughout the East, especially if you look in the top half, guys can score, guys can do things on the offensive end. But the championship mentality, which is where I see the Bucks sort of having that advantage, is because I do believe that you can see that difference in those guys, in their approach. They're led by someone who gives effort for every single possession on both sides of the floor, and that definitely trickles down throughout that team. So, the mindset of a champion, the mindset of doing what is necessary and what it takes to win, maybe sacrificing a lot of things that James Harden might have grown accustomed to with the Rockets in order to win. All of these questions still have to be answered, and you definitely can't overlook them, because they're definitely huge, huge pieces to any successful winning program.
This courtroom does concede, because listening to the argument that all three of you have put together, I think the verdict is probably clear that the Philadelphia 76ers still have work to do at this moment in time. But I will allude to something that BJ said. This move has set up the opportunity for a potential playoff series between the Nets and the Sixers that I hope that we're all there to enjoy.